What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here for PackersNews.com, live on Facebook late in the day on Thursday after a morning whirlwind from QB1 there at the Super Bowl. Aaron Rodgers making appearances throughout the day, starting with Good Morning Football on NFL Network, then Wingo and Golic and Wingo, or whatever that show is called on ESPN, as well as the Dan Patrick Show and the Rich Eisen Show. And basically he's kicking up some dust with his comments on the ESPN program about Alex Van Pelt being shown the door and walking over to Cincinnati for the same job to coach quarterbacks over there. And a lot of drama throughout the day surrounding those comments. Outside of that, he's pretty much saying the obvious on each of these stops, both that he's feeling well, his shoulders appears fine, he's swinging a golf club just fine, and also the fact that the Packers need to improve on the defensive side of the ball. Point blank saying we need to get back to playing championship defense. Obviously, I don't think there's anybody else that would disagree with that statement and that sentiment. Rodgers doing a good job of pointing out that the four participants in the AFC and NFC championship games all shared one common theme, and that was great play on the defensive side of the ball. Hello, everyone checking in. Very, very nice. Hundley cost him the job. If you're talking about Alex Van Pelt, I would be lying if I said I didn't think that was a component of it. Perhaps McCarthy pushes harder to get Van Pelt back into the fold if he sees better play from his backup quarterback. Now, that said, going back to 2016, Van Pelt had made it clear that he wanted to ride out his contract and then wanted to pursue other opportunities, mostly probably because of McCarthy's penchant for not allowing guys on his staff interview opportunities in other places. When chances to advance have come along, he has often, almost always, blocked guys from interviewing. So Van Pelt, very early on, made it clear that he wanted to explore opportunities at the end of his contract. Now, could McCarthy and or Rodgers have said something, even throughout this year when things were going sour with Hundley and said, look, we really want you back? He could have, but maybe Hundley's play tempered McCarthy's enthusiasm in that regard. There's a lot of moving parts here, but I think the one that everyone keeps harping on is how could they not consult with Aaron Rodgers? And I understand that idea. I understand that he's the face of the franchise. You're about to give him $1 billion in a new contract. But ultimately, coaches coach and players play. And it's not Rodgers' job to decide who gets to be the quarterback's coach. That's McCarthy's job. And I understand that, Rodgers and Van Pelt had a really good relationship. Rodgers clearly liked working with the guy. But as he himself pointed out, they have Joe Philbin coming back as offensive coordinator, and their offense has never been better than when Philbin's been in the building. And new blood, new ideas, new voices, fresh ideas, always a good idea, especially for a quarterback who is, approaching the last 4 or 5 years of his career. Always good to get a new voice, get a new perspective. And that was probably what McCarthy was thinking after this run that, let's not forget, under Van Pelt's tutelage, Rodgers had some of his worst play in his career in 2015 and beginning of 2016. So, like I said, there are a lot of moving parts there. What's the news on Sam Shields? Is he attempting a comeback? I'm sure he's working out in the hopes of maybe getting a look from an NFL team, but I find it really hard to believe a general manager is going to sign Sam Shields to a contract knowing two things. One, that he is a hit away from a concussion that could keep him out for a year, which is essentially what happened there in that last game he played down in Jacksonville. He sustained a concussion that was so bad that it kept him out for the entire season. But also, he has two pending off-field issues, legal issues, that could end up, if they haven't already, wind up putting him in a number of different programs with the NFL that could result in him missing not only games, say like a 4-game suspension, but he could be a strike away from having a full year's suspension just for his off-field issues. So you put all that together, and it's really hard to imagine a general manager bringing him into the fold and counting on him in any way, especially when you think of the fact that as an older guy, they're going to have to pay him a significant, not significant, but significant in the sense that they can't, get him on the cheap like you could, say, a draft pick or an undrafted free agent. You'd have to pay him the veterans minimum, and he's probably not going to be contributing on special teams. So you're going to have to play him. And then the issues come into play that I just talked about. Play a song for us. Guys, nobody wants me to touch that guitar. Trust me. Let's see. Rousey to WWE in 2018. McCarthy to WWE in 2019. That's an interesting take. Van Pelt not hard enough on Aaron Rodgers or challenging enough. That's a possibility. Maybe McCarthy saw exactly that. It's hard to say. I mean, a lot of the stuff that goes on between the QB coach and the QB, traditionally a lot of head coaches don't see that because it happens in meeting rooms and meetings that the head coach isn't privy to. But since, it is Mike McCarthy's offense they're running and he's an offensive-minded coach, he's mentioned a couple times that he's a little bit more involved in those things, in those meetings. So perhaps he saw that. What's going on with Clay Matthews? At the moment, I saw he's active on Instagram again. But outside of that, nothing in so much that there have been no word or scuttlebutt about his contract. I have to think that Gutekunst and Ball will approach him at some point prior to March 14th to discuss either maybe a restructuring and or an extension that would lower his cap hit in 2018. But that's just guesswork on my part. We'll see. Any scuttlebutt on how defensive coach meetings are going? Nothing yet. We'll probably start to hear a little something during the combine. It's when we finally get talk to some of these guys away from the podium, so to speak. And every once in a while you get a couple nuggets during that week in Indianapolis, which starts, I leave February 27th for that. So it'll be a little bit yet, but we'll hopefully get some good stuff then. As soon as Rodgers' talents begin to decline, his assumption of authority will become a big problem. Well, yes and no. I mean, as long as his skills can decline, so to speak, but as long as he's still producing, Tom Brady is not the physical specimen he used to be. Not that he was ever a phenomenal athlete on the field, but you can do a lot with your mind and keeping your body in shape. Maybe Rodgers doesn't have the escapability or the arm strength that he once had these next few years, but as long as he can play the game, read coverages, diagnose things pre-snap, a lot of this game is mental, especially at the level they're playing at. So I get that idea, what you're saying, especially when Packer fans remember all too well Brett Favre really playing games there at the end with the tantrums, not trading for Randy Moss, famously saying, it's not in my contract that I mentor Aaron Rodgers, all of those things. And I don't think we'll ever get to that point with Aaron Rodgers. He doesn't strike me as that kind of individual. He's passive-aggressive, as he showed today, but that's a different ball of wax. How much longer can we expect Rodgers to be a good quarterback, Christopher? I'd say a good another 5-6 years, probably. And I'm talking upper echelon level. I mean, Tom Brady and Drew Brees are still playing pretty well. And I don't think you're ever going to see Aaron Rodgers like we saw Peyton Manning his last year, which was painful to watch. I think you'll see Rodgers a good 4 or 5 years yet, maybe 5-6 years. Let's see what else we got. Stacy telling someone no. Mike McCarthy or Joe Philbin calling plays. Diego, it would be Mike McCarthy. Joe Philbin will definitely be a sounding board. It will help with game planning. Will undoubtedly be up in the booth during the season to kind of give suggestions and point out tendencies and, kind of be that guy that Mike McCarthy needs, either reining him in or pushing him on, which McCarthy admitted. He needs a fresh voice there. He needed someone. He had familiarity with Philbin, and that's one of the things that made their offense so good in 2011. So he won't be calling plays, but he will be very much involved. Rodgers needs to be consulted on all things that affect him. Whoo, boy, could I not disagree with that more. Man, at the end of the day, coaches coach and players play. he's a superstar, and, you know, he is going to get paid handsomely for all that he's done for the franchise and the organization, but it ain't his job to pick coaches. It's the coach's job to pick the coaches, and then the coaches coach the players, and the players go out on the field and play. I don't care how big you are. That's not your gig. Just like I didn't understand when people were talking about consulting Rodgers during the GM search. That ain't his gig. That ain't his job. That ain't what they pay him to do. They pay him to go out there and use that godlike ability on the football field. After that, that is where it stops. I mean, I understand why Rodgers maybe should get special consideration, but if I'm a Packers fan, I'm glad they don't. I disagree with you. Aaron Rodgers should have some say. That's okay. Reasonable people can disagree. That's what makes this beautiful world go around. Outside linebacker, most pressing need. Andy, I think so. I think one of the most glaring needs outside of outside linebacker is right tackle, just because who knows what's going to happen without Brian Bulaga being available at the start of the year. But overall, yes, I'd say outside linebacker, someone who can rush the passer, create some havoc, and win a one-on-one. Could you imagine Rodgers' reaction to public criticism from McCarthy? That is something I talked about on my podcast, which you can check out at packersnews.com. I think it just went up a little earlier this afternoon. It is an unfortunate dynamic throughout the history of the relationship between Rodgers and McCarthy. Mike McCarthy has never, ever, ever, ever publicly disparaged Rodgers in any way, even when, and I know there are people out there already saying, oh, well, you know, Aaron Rodgers is a god and you could never criticize him. Trust me, there have been plenty of opportunities for McCarthy to lash out, to legitimately complain about his quarterback. I mean, good part of 2015, first part of 2016, when Rodgers was, I mean, what's wrong with Aaron Rodgers became a cottage industry. You go back and look after that Cowboys game in 2016, which is about the worst game I've seen Rodgers play in the last 5 years. And you go look at McCarthy's quotes after the game. You'd never know his quarterback played poorly at all. Other times, like, I don't need a reckoning. I won't go down the list. But this idea that, you know, McCarthy will never, ever, and that is his philosophy. He has laid it out there several times. He doesn't correct people in the media. He always says to us, and we always try and get him to, you know, like, what about this guy? What about that guy? And he never says anything negative. It is his philosophy, is how he chooses to handle the media, and that's fine. That's who he is. But on the flip side, he has his quarterback who never misses a chance to take a passive-aggressive shot at his head coach. I just think that's unfortunate. I don't understand why that can't just be kept in-house and dealt with in-house. But, you know, like I said, that's McCarthy's philosophy. That's Rodgers and his personality. That's how he handles things, and he wants to handle things clearly. So, hey, man, that's floats your boat. It's nothing, I can't say anything about it. That's how he is, and that's how he wants to handle things, and, you know, that's fine. I think it's time for someone to draw you up a background. Nice. Can you play a little guitar to relieve the stress? No, I'm not stressed, man. McCarthy did call Lacey for his weight. Yes, at the end of the, was it 2014, 13? That season-ending press conference is the one time he did. And he admits it. He says, I messed up there. Shouldn't have done it. I think that speaks to how desperate he was to get Lacey to come back on board. He was really frustrated with Lacey at that point. But yes, you're correct. He did that one time. Regards from Spain. Hello. Do I think Jordy Nelson should be released for cap reasons? I tell you what, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I do think they will approach him about a restructure, possibly, you know, shaving some salary down there and maybe allowing him to try and earn it back through incentives. Now, if and when they approach him, they have to be ready for him to say no. I don't think he's going to. I think he has stated he's open to it. He's open to a restructuring. But if he does refuse, then maybe they might cut him. But I don't think it gets that far. I think They will ask for a restructure of the contract, and I do think he will acquiesce to those requests. I'm guessing it was a last-second ditch effort to motivate Lacey. I agree. That's what I mean. I think that's how desperate McCarthy was in that moment. There was a lot of stuff that went on behind the scenes that year with Lacey, and I think McCarthy was pretty much at his wit's end trying to reach the kid. If a big-time 4-3 end falls to 14, does Petten change his scheme? Ooh, that's a really good question. I don't think the idea isn't that he would change his scheme, but I do think if whoever that prospect is did fall there and say Gutekunst thought it was too good to pass up, I think he can easily adapt to it. I don't think it's a question of changing the scheme. You go look at what he did in Buffalo when he had Mario Williams. I mean, Mario Williams played the majority of the snap. Well, I won't say the majority, but a lot of the snaps with his hand on the ground, like a 4-3 end in that defense. He stood up a bunch too, but I think he's very adaptable, and I think that's one of the reasons McCarthy wanted to hire him. What dead weight would you trim from the current roster? Ooh, that's a good question. I think guys like Kyler Fackrell, Trevor Davis, those are the two that leap to mind. I just think if the idea is to push for a championship and to improve your squad, you know what you have with those guys, and it's not much. You've got speed with Davis. He had one nice return all season long, but you had to wade through a season of questionable decision-making as a punt returner. When he finally did get his shots downfield, I mean, this is your speed guy. This is the guy you took specifically because he had the speed to get downfield and get deep. I mean, that ball that Hundley threw that's like right in front of him and he doesn't even put his arms up. What? Well, he lost it in the lights. How? You got a player who you're counting on to get deep and he can't track a ball in prime time? I just think you got to move on from that. And then with Fackrell, I mean, it's just a sad accounting when you look at his play all year, and he tries hard, and that's fine. They all try hard, but then you get Reggie Gilbert up for the last two games, and he gives you as much, if not more, in those two games than you ever saw from Fackrell all year long. It's time to go. Time to move on there. Do you think Adams can have a better season next season? If you're talking about Montrevious Adams, I think it'd be impossible for him not to. If you're talking about Devontae Adams, yes, I do actually. I think he had a really good year this year, but I think a full season with Aaron Rodgers, his numbers could be even more impressive. A lot of people ask this question every time I do one of these about Petten being on the sideline or the booth. They haven't said yet. Joe Philbin was asked, and he said that they haven't done game day assignments yet. I would imagine he'd be on the sideline. I think he's been on the sideline both with the Jets and the Bills as a coordinator. I can't be sure, but I think that's right. So I'm guessing on the sideline, but they haven't determined that yet officially. I am ready for Dean Lowry to get better. Yeah, I expected more of a jump from him last year than what we ended up seeing. I still think he played pretty darn well. Pretty consistently. The problem with that level of consistency wasn't quite as high as I thought it was going to be. He didn't show you much as a pass rusher. He did show up against the run. He can be blown off the ball by some of the better linemen. But down in, down out, he came to work and he did everything he was asked, and he seemed pretty assignment sure. And I mean, the world needs ditch diggers too, and he's a lunch pail guy, and they're going to need him. There's no doubt about that. Will Packers draft wide receivers? Is it a big priority? I think they got to get some speed. They got to find some speed there. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And that's one of the reasons, I think they looked at Trevor Davis. But like I said, man, it's time to move on. Now, the question for me is how much does D'Angelo Yancey, kind of progress from year one to year two? Because he looked very promising down the stretch there in camp and preseason. The issue there is he's another big guy who's not exactly a burner, and they have a bunch of those. So I don't know if he cracks the 53 this year, but he should. And if that's the case, then maybe they don't draft wide receivers as a priority, but I do think they'll look at them. One of the reasons the offense has been so successful throughout the years is because Ted Thompson has continually supplied Mike McCarthy with a bunch of wide receivers. I mean, especially when you're running an offense that uses 3, 4, even 5 wide receivers at times on a consistent basis, you're going to need a bunch. Guys are going to get injured. Guys are going to go through slumps. Guys are going to have, are going to progress at different rates. So McCarthy was always lucky in that regard when it came to Thompson, supplying him with lots of different guys. And I would think Gutekunst would approach things in a similar manner. What do I think the future for Ripkowski is with Carriage on board? I tell you what, I thought Carriage had a better camp last year, and Ripkowski was really inconsistent all year long. It's something that didn't get a lot of play during the season. We haven't talked about it a lot in the offseason so far, but Ripkowski was really inconsistent last year, and Carriage, like I said, he played lights out in camp. So I would tend to think they'll bring both back this summer and see kind of where the chips fall where they may. If Carriage doesn't get injured, maybe he even would have made the squad, but we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. I do think, it was funny how with the emergence of the 2 rookie running backs, and then, obviously at the beginning of the year they had Ty Montgomery, Ripkowski didn't get the ball nearly as much as he did 2 years ago, where he was surprisingly effective as a ball carrier. But this year they didn't use him as much, and when they did, he wasn't really as consistent as I think they would have liked. But we'll see how that plays out. Do you want King to put on a little weight, protect that shoulder a little bit more? Maybe a little bit, but it's funny enough, I don't think he needs more weight up top. I think he needs more weight in his legs, just a little bit. But I think he can play where he's at. Oh, Gene, tight end position assessment. I can't speak today. Draft, free agency, both probably. I've said it a couple times here on Facebook. I think it's a position that's in need of an overhaul. The problem with looking to the draft, while smart idea long term, very rarely, if ever, in the NFL do you get instant contributors at the tight end position at their rookie year. The most talented guys in the league have real trouble making that transition and being productive their first year. So I would tend to think the Packers probably look at free agency to kind of fill things out first and then hit the draft. Eric Ebron, it's possible, Marcus. He's a pretty inconsistent player, but he obviously had a better year this year. But I'm always kind of wary when you look at those guys who don't really light it up and then are really inconsistent and then kind of turn it on that year. It's a contract year. I don't know. I'm a bit wary of that, but you never know. I mean, he did look markedly improved this year, so it's possible. Let's see if he even hits free agency too. That's the other problem with talking free agency on February 1st, because we'll see who gets tagged, franchise, transition, what have you, and then who gets re-signed. And once those things happen, the free agent lists and who's available will look very different than they do on February 1st. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm going to have to jump, but I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question. They do fly by, but I can't believe how great you guys are. Each and every day I'm on here, there's 400 people. It's incredible. Thanks, everyone. Make sure you're checking PackersNews.com for all the latest. I will be back tomorrow to wrap up the week. In the meantime, check PackersNews.com. Have a good night.